Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled to be your mentor on this journey today, so let's just dive right in because we are tackling something absolutely profound. We're going to explore how to actually distinguish fundamental, true reality from parasitic, manipulative imitation in our everyday lives. Because whether you realize it or not, we are constantly faced with forces that are trying to shape our choices, our desires, and really our very identities. So our goal today is to build a highly practical framework. I want you to be able to instantly recognize when you're being manipulated by a counterfeit power and when you're actually being invited into something authentic. So let's start things off with a pretty massive question. Is evil the equal twin of good? You know, mortals often imagine this cosmic war as a perfectly balanced scale, right? Like there's one dark force, one bright force. They're perfectly equal in strength, totally opposite in purpose. We literally see this in pop culture all the time. We just kind of assume the universe is this eternal tug of war. But here's the thing. That assumption masks a core illusion. This whole image of perfect balance actually comforts frightened minds because, well, it makes evil seem orderly. It makes it predictable. But it's a massive trap. It flatters evil by granting it a legitimate throne right beside goodness. And today, we're going to completely dismantle that assumption. To really understand this, we have to define what manipulative or demonic power actually is. And let me be clear, it is absolutely not an eternal half of reality. Think of it more like a wound that somehow learned to speak, or a theft that learned how to perform a ceremony. It's a hunger that learned to wear names. It's really just a parasite pretending to be a structural pillar. And listen, even if an oppressive force becomes vast, ancient, and terrifying, age does not turn a rebellion into an origin. A disease can spread like wildfire through an entire kingdom, sure, but that doesn't suddenly make it the equal twin of health. Okay, so here's our roadmap for the masterclass today. We'll start with the broken mirror illusion. Then we'll cover consumption versus communion, coercion versus consent, contracts versus callings, spotting the inversions, and we'll wrap up with the concept of unborrowed light. You're going to walk away with a really sharp toolkit for spotting modern spiritual manipulation. Section 1, the broken mirror illusion. Why evil is definitely not an equal opposite. Now, this is a really crucial lesson because if you let darkness control your story by merely reacting to it, you've already lost your freedom. There's a fascinating story in the archives of our source text where an angelic teacher named Naoriel leads a student, Mira, into what's called the Hall of Unmade Reflections. It's this wild room where every single mirror has been removed, so there are just these empty gold frames hanging there. Naoriel uses this to explain that a demonic crown, a manipulative power, always desperately seeks a mirror. It wants the holy realm to define itself as its exact opposite. In the archives, there's a diagram drawn by a deceived king showing a crown of light and a crown of shadow placed at the exact same height. The demonic princes absolutely loved this drawing because it made them feel necessary. But the angels, they crossed it right out. Why? Because any power that lives only as an opposite remains permanently chained to the thing it opposes. If you only define yourself as anti-evil, guess what? The evil is still dictating the terms of engagement. The fundamental reality is this. Holy power doesn't need darkness in order to know it is light. It doesn't need corruption to become pure, and it certainly doesn't need a tyrant to become merciful. True holiness and authentic purpose function completely independently of their opposites. It is the true foundational architecture of creation. It's not just some reaction to a parasite. Section 2, consumption versus communion. Let's look at the actual mechanics of true origin. So how do these different powers actually interact with you on a daily basis? Well, a manipulative demonic force operates entirely on consumption. It feeds by taking. It wants your praise, your attention, your obedience, your fear. And here is the truly terrifying part. Even when it appears to be giving you something, it's really only giving in order to create a deeper hunger for more. Its generosity is basically just a hook covered in honey. Authentic holy power, on the flip side, operates on communion. It joins with you without swallowing you up. It strengthens you without stealing your individual identity. Manipulation basically says, become mine. True power says, become whole. To help visualize this, Naoriel placed 2 cups before his student. One was filled with this dark fire, and the other was filled with clear light. When shadows were poured into the dark fire, sure, the fire grew larger, but everything poured into it was completely destroyed. It lost its distinct form entirely. But the cup of clear light? Totally different. It didn't selfishly gorge itself to grow in size. Instead, every single crystal placed near that clear light began to shine brilliantly with its own unique color. That is the essence of true origin, guys. It makes you more of who you were actually meant to be, not just a swallowed-up clone of some controlling leader. Section 3, Coercion versus Consent, the test of the lantern. Okay, this is the ultimate test for distinguishing between a force that commands downward and one that invites upward. Demonic power absolutely loves coercion because it separates command from love. It demands action while completely refusing genuine relationship. It speaks downward, and then it calls the terrible silence beneath it peace. But holy power is fundamentally rooted in invitation. Now, yes, it can command you to rise, but that command awakens what your soul was already created to become. Manipulation just wants your blind obedience so it can prove it has control. Authentic calling, though, that requires your living, breathing, active consent. And this brings us to this really profound metaphor of the empty lantern. The student asks a great question. Why don't angels simply overpower human will to stop us from making every single evil choice? To explain, Naoriel opens an empty lantern. He says, look, if a flame is forced into this lantern by violence, it's just going to burn the glass black. But a flame that is welcomed by the wick, that gives brilliant light. A controlling force can easily produce submission, for sure, but it can never, ever produce true holiness. Because holiness requires a yes that remains completely alive inside the one who speaks it. Moving to Section 4, Contracts versus Callings. The trap of transactions. This is where we see seekers getting tempted in their everyday lives through these seemingly beneficial bargains. And honestly, how often do we encounter this? A manipulative force comes along and offers a contract. It says, hey, give me your sleep and I'll give you visions. Give me your mercy, I'll give you victory. But here's the catch. Every single bargain hides a clause written in hunger, and it binds the receiver to an endless debt. Holy power doesn't work like that. It operates through callings. A calling isn't some transaction where you buy power from heaven. Not at all. It's an awakening of a purpose that was already seated deep within you. The dark crowns ask you, what will you pay? The angels ask, what were you made to serve? The archives share this really beautiful story that makes this so clear. There was this merchant who signed a dark contract to get the gift of persuasion. And his words became incredibly smooth, incredibly sweet. But every single conversation he had left the people around him poorer in spirit. Now contrast that with a poor teacher in the same story who had no contract at all. Her words were completely plain, simple. Yet the children who heard her speak became visibly braver and way less ashamed of the truth. It's a perfect reminder that true power doesn't sell itself, simply because it cannot be bought. Section 5. Spotting the spiritual inversions. How to identify daily traps. So how do we actually identify these traps in real life, where this parasite twists natural human traits? Remember, demonic power rarely creates anything from scratch. It literally can't. It just takes a holy or natural good and turns it completely upside down. Natural healthy desire, it gets inverted into addiction. Good authority is twisted into tyranny. True beauty becomes shallow vanity. Natural grief gets pushed into bottomless despair. And seeking knowledge becomes arrogant pride. The parasite doesn't have its own raw materials. It just infects what is already good and flips it on its head. And here is where we all need to be incredibly vigilant: the trap of false opposites. Let's walk through exactly how this happens. Step 1, a soul escapes a situation of extreme cruelty. Step 2, the parasitic power doesn't try to make them cruel again. That would be too obvious. Instead, it pushes them into the extreme false opposite, which is total emotional numbness. Step 3, the victim is tricked into calling this numbness peace. But fleeing chaos into strict, numb oppression is not true order. You haven't escaped the parasite at all. You've just flipped to the other side of its broken mirror. True power does not merely invert the inversion. If a manipulative force twists beauty into vanity, holy power doesn't answer by despising beauty or saying beauty is bad. No, it heals. It restores beauty to its original healthy purpose as a form of gratitude. It refuses to chase these false opposites. It simply brings the wounded thing back to its true foundational self. And finally, Section 6, the power of unborrowed light, sacred refusal. This right here is your ultimate defense mechanism, seekers. Unborrowed light. This is holy power that shines simply because shining is its inherent, undeniable nature. It is origin remembered. It's not pale just because darkness exists, and it's not bright just because demons happen to be dark. Think about what this actually means for your own life. True purpose does not need to fight fire with fire. It doesn't need to adopt the cruel, toxic tactics of its enemy just to get a win. Because if you do that, well, the enemy has still successfully changed who you are. Which brings us to the absolutely majestic, angelic refusals. The hierarchy of true power contains refusals just as much as it contains abilities. A holy voice that can command entire armies but utterly refuses to lie, that is stronger than thunder. Look at these refusals. The first radiance refuses vanity. The second vault refuses false law. The fourth dominion refuses ownership over others. The eighth cry refuses to use propaganda. And the ninth lantern completely refuses to parade shame as a spectacle. True strength is measured not just by what you have the power to do, but by the lines you will literally never cross to achieve victory. Restraint is not weakness. Restraint is absolute obedience to your purpose. All of this builds to this incredible climax at the Miraless court. Naoriel is facing down a black crown, and the crown challenges him, screaming, "Destroy me with my own force. Dominate me. Terrify me." Now, a lot of us would take that bait, right? We'd think we need to beat the bully at their own game. But Naoriel did something completely astonishing. He turned his back on the crown entirely. He turned around and faced the wounded souls standing behind it, the seduced king, the frightened children, the hollowed-out soldiers, and he healed them. He named them, and when no one needed the crown to explain their pain anymore, the crown just cracked. He didn't fight the mirror. He simply removed its audience entirely. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to carry with you. In your own everyday life, when you are faced with manipulation, with control, with these spiritual inversions, what are you going to do? Are you going to fight the mirror, exhausting yourself by constantly reacting to the parasite? Or will you stand firmly in your own unborrowed light, remember your origin, and remove the parasite's audience entirely? Thank you so much for joining me in this masterclass. Keep seeking that clear light, and I will see you in our next explainer.